Coming up in our number 10 spot, Up. I'm pretty sure that any living and breathing person on the planet felt something when they watched Up. I mean, the montage of Carl and Ellie's life together could pull at the heartstrings of even the most cynical human, not to mention the arrival of the adorable Boy Scout Russell, who managed to help grumpy old Carl find the joy in life again. And while the story of the balloon lifting them up and taking them to Paradise Falls at first seems like a wholesome and magical event, there are some out there who theorize the story might not be quite as uplifting as what we've all come to believe. The evil theory suggests that Carl is actually dead the whole time, but that he's unable to pass into the afterlife. So in comes Russell, who isn't a young scout trying to earn his wilderness explorer badge, but actually an angel trying to earn his wings by bringing Carl up to heaven, or paradise. The theory then goes on to explain that Charles Muntz, the mad explorer, is really a fallen angel hell-bent on dragging Carl to the underworld with his hellhounds. I mean, as if this movie didn't make me cry enough, the idea that Carl is already dead and that the bad guy is trying to drag him down to hell the whole time is definitely not something I want to be true. Next up at number 9, Inside Out. Out of all the wild and evil fan theories I have come across, this Inside Out theory is definitely one I would have never seen coming. In the movie, the main character Riley has just moved from Minnesota to San Francisco with her family, and she's deeply unhappy. Now, in the movie, it's said that they moved because of her dad's job. However, there is a theory that they actually moved because Riley's mom committed credit card fraud. The reason behind this seemingly out-of-this-world theory, apparently on the back of Riley's mom's credit card, the signature reads K. Ann Anderson, which some people online have pointed out is Bonnie's mom's name in Toy Story 3. However, Riley's mom's name is Jill Anderson, so why would she have a credit card with a different name on it unless she is a credit card stealing criminal who forced her family to move quickly to a new city to avoid being caught? I mean, is it potentially a bit of a stretch? For sure, but that would make it all the more evil if it turned out to be true. Coming in at number 8, Boo. The lovable, babbling Boo is easily one of my favorite characters in Monsters, Inc. But what's interesting about her is that aside from Sully being her monster, we actually don't really know anything about her. But that hasn't stopped fans from trying to find clues. The theory is that Boo, whose real name is apparently Mary, appears to have superpowers like appearing out of nowhere, and theorists claim that Boo is actually a crossover character from the Incredibles universe. But here is where it gets even weirder. Some out there believe that Boo is actually Edna's daughter. Now, we know Edna isn't too fond of tiny humans, so the theory claims that Edna put Boo up for adoption to the superhero Thunderhead, who Edna mentions is good with kids, and whose file also says he has adopted 5 of them. I mean, maybe it's not that evil, but it's definitely strange and definitely has me questioning everything. Coming in at number 7, Toy Story. There are a lot of theories out there specifically about Toy Story, like that Andy's dad is dead, or that the entire franchise is an allegory for the Illuminati, to name a few. However, one of the most evil ones out there is the toy corpse theory. If you haven't heard of it before, it was first theorized after a post to Twitter by the user @Stigib3 that said, quote, "My daughter just ruined Toy Story forever. She said if one of the toys died, Andy wouldn't know and he'd carry on playing with its corpse." I know, super creepy, but let's think about it for a minute. If Andy doesn't know that his toys come alive when he leaves the room, logically, he would have no clue that they could die. So technically speaking, yeah, he could totally just be playing with dead toy corpses unknowingly. That being said, some fans aren't so sure, as they pointed out that the alive toys would probably either bury or at least hide the toys so as not to have to watch or worse, play with their dead friends. However, all that in mind, the sheer idea of the toys being able to die is still super awful. Next up at number 6, Cars. What's not to love about the Cars movie? Spoiled race car moves to small town, hates it at first, but eventually makes new, unsuspecting friends, falls in love, and becomes a good person, or Car, happily ever after. But according to some online, the entire world that Cars is set in could be way darker than we ever thought. The theory states that Cars is set incredibly far in the future, like we're talking beyond the Wall-E timeline, wherein the Earth has become completely void of humans and is now only populated by sentient vehicles. Now, that part isn't too crazy. I mean, it's not hard to piece together that it's a world made up of cars that are kind of human-like, but it's an animated movie after all, so most people don't think too hard about it. But have we ever thought about how or why all the humans are gone? This evil theory claims that Cars killed them all, and then using their advanced AI technologies, adopted the personalities of their previous owners. So not only are they killer cars, they would pretty much be identity theft killer robots too. Next up at number 5, Monsters Inc. and Inside Out. It's a pretty popular belief that all the movies in the Disney Pixar canon exist in the same universe, meaning that there is a huge potential for quite a bit of crossover. And Reddit user Ice Metal Punk theorizes a pretty dark concept revolving around the crossover of Inside Out and Monsters Inc. The theory begins by explaining that in Inside Out, we learn that everything forgotten gets dropped into the memory dump, then disappears forever. We see this happen with Bing Bong, Riley's imaginary friend, but did you ever really stop to think about where their forgotten memories actually disappear to? I mean, they have to go somewhere, right? Well, according to this Reddit user, they suggest that the monsters in Monsters Inc. are actually the imaginary friends that humans forget as they grow up, and that the creatures had to learn to live together and form a functioning society. Not only that, but if you also consider the fact that the monsters are scaring their carefully selected tiny humans at the beginning of the movie, would that mean that they are trying to scare the very people who they once were the imaginary friend of? Also, does the memory dump affect them? Like, do they remember their human from before, or is this just some random client to them? I don't know, I have many questions, but mostly, I just hope it's not true. Coming in at number 4, clean energy. Speaking of Monsters Inc. theories, I feel pretty confident saying that this one is probably the strangest and most gruesome I came across. Posted by Reddit user Curly Quickly Colorful, they suggest that Monsters Inc. did not always use screams to make their energy, but once upon a time used blood. Okay? I know what you're thinking, but just stay with me for a minute. They explain that early on in the movie, you hear a commercial coming from Sully's TV talking about producing superior screams that they can refine into clean, dependable energy. And Reddit user suggests that, quote, if the concept of clean energy exists in this world, and they find the need to point it out in their advertising, logic would dictate that a different, theoretically dirtier, form of energy was harvested and utilized to power Monstropolis before Screams. And of course, what is the grossest, most awful thing they could harvest? Well, blood. And as much as I hope to God this theory isn't true, I can kind of see where they came up with it. I mean, if we think about energy in the real world, there is clean energy like solar power compared to dirtier energy like oil, and I suppose blood could be like the oil of the monster world? I don't know, I don't want to think about this one too hard. Coming in at number 3, Wall-E's true identity. While I definitely do not want a robot takeover of the world, if there is one robot who I would gladly share the planet with, it's Wall-E. I mean, not only is he the most adorable thing in the world, making little trash cubes and listening to musicals, but he also saves the world and eventually helps the humans return back home. Or at least that is what most people probably believe. Some, however, have a more cynical view of who Wall-E really is. And they think that he is not a hero at all, but that he is Satan. Yep, you heard that correctly. Let me just read you the quote. We have an entity, Wall-E/Satan, who gives an object, seedling/apple, to a robot/woman named Eve, which starts a chain of events that led to mankind losing a paradise and getting stranded on Earth. They then go on to explain that, quote, by the end of the movie, mankind has made its return to Earth, but they no longer lead an easygoing, carefree life. Now they must perform back-breaking labor in order to bring Earth back back to a habitable state, leaving the relative paradise of the axiom behind. Inevitably, this will lead to inequity and resource disparity, which in turn will lead to conflict, strife, and jealousy, which will lead to anger, hatred, and war, and perhaps the eventual re-destruction of the planet Earth. Then, once more, humans will be forced to leave their homeworld behind, floating through space in search of a better life, seeking the paradise they lost after the plant bearer tempted Eve. I mean, it's hard to get more evil than Satan, and the most lovable character somehow being evil incarnate is just about the worst thing I can think of. Coming in at number 2, Wall-E Universe. While we're on the topic of strange theories about the beloved robot, a video posted on YouTube by user MattPat has a chilling theory that will definitely be keeping me awake at night. MattPat begins by explaining that the idea that the Earth could be completely covered in trash in the time frame that the film sets it up in is not only unrealistic, but impossible. Instead, he theorized that the planet was not actually destroyed by human greed, as the viewers are led to believe, but instead that, by and large, the giant monopoly company purposefully ruined it. He says, quote, "We see abandoned buildings, light poles, street signs, and other indicators that this once was a thriving metropolis. This indicates the breakdown of one of the most basic things for a modern society to function, a waste management system that transports waste out of the city towards landfills." Pat says that from the looks of it, Starliners were designed as a luxury space cruise, but the company couldn't convince people to go on their holidays, so they had to find a way to force people onto these ships, and that essentially, in order to force Earth's population onto the BNL ships like Axiom, they stopped funding waste management, convinced the people it was their fault, and drove them to live on the ship where they would have no choice but to consume all BNL products for the rest of their lives. I mean, talk about evil. Last up in our number 1 spot is Nemo. Since its release in 2003, the story of Nemo has stolen the hearts of people all around the globe. But what if I told you that some people out there are questioning the wholesome story of a dad looking for his lost son, and that maybe it could actually be much darker than meets the eye? As we know, the beginning of the film starts off incredibly somber. Marlin and his wife are attacked by a barracuda, and tragically his wife, along with all but one egg, are eaten, and that one remaining egg grows to be Nemo, whom Marlin is incredibly protective of. But Reddit user Darklighter5000 suggests that the barracuda actually ate all the eggs, and that Marlin, struggling to cope with his reality, creates a world where one survives, meaning that Nemo is entirely a figment of Marlin's imagination, and that we're watching Marlin deal with his grief by inventing a story where he's trying to save his son. This theory is backed by a few points, the first being that Nemo in Latin means no one, and so the title of the film is technically Finding No One. The second is that the show goes through the different stages of grief. Denial, he won't let his son go to school because it's not safe. Then anger, he scolds his son for venturing out of his control. Next, bargaining, he makes friends with an amnesiac travel buddy to help him find his son. Followed by despair, he sees his son flushed down the drain. And lastly, acceptance, he learns to let go. What do you think? Could Nemo really be dead? Starting us off at number 10, Hans can time travel. The villain of Frozen, Hans, is not a hard person to hate. At the end of the first movie, after imprisoning Anna and, just trying to ruin everything, Hans is arrested and banished from Arendelle for his treason and attempting to take out the royal sisters. But what if the ending was a little more complicated than we are led to believe? This theory pointed out that in Big Hero 6, there is an Easter egg where if you pay very close attention, you'll see a wanted poster for Hans in the police station. Now, for all of this to make sense, that would have to mean that Hans can time travel, since Big Hero 6 and Frozen are set like hundreds of years apart. Now, this would mean that after being exiled from Arendelle, he managed to travel to a new time in the universe where no one knew his evil deeds and start over. But of course, in this new time, he's wanted, meaning that there is a whole other group of people he could have hurt, backstabbed, or most terrifyingly of all, killed. So let's just hope this Easter egg is one that turns out to be unfounded. Coming in at number 9, the Ice Spirit. This next theory imagines not only a crossover with another Disney film, but a cross-universe theory outside of the Disney canon. It begins by stating that in Frozen 2, during the song Show Yourself, you can see Elsa's mom calling to the siren. Now, this is all possible because of her family's past using dark magic in order to use the power of the Ice Spirit, hence why Elsa has ice powers in the first place. Now, the theory part of all of this comes into play from an episode of Once Upon a Time, where Elsa's character in that show explained that Elsa's mom has an ancestor called Olaf, who also happens to have ice powers. So with that in mind, this theory suggests that when Elsa is singing Let It Go, she was actually possessed by her ancestor Olaf's ghost, who she then managed to bring back to life in snowman form. I mean, does it require a little bit of stretching to make it all work? I mean, kinda, but the idea that my sweet little Olaf was actually the one possessing Elsa is definitely not something I want to be true. Coming in at number 8, Tarzan crossover. Just like every other franchise on the planet, there are tons of fans out there who try to find links to interconnect as many of the Disney movies into one universe as possible. And one of the most wild ones I have ever read about is the Tarzan and Frozen crossover. So if you've seen Frozen, you'll recall that a major plot point in the beginning of the film is that the Queen and King of Arendelle get tragically lost at sea when Elsa and Anna are young. And while it isn't explicitly said, it is presumed that the pair die at sea. However, many fans speculate that their fate could actually have been a bit more complicated than that. One fan theory suggests that while the ship almost definitely capsized and sank, that they did not go down with it, and instead became stranded on a deserted island. From there, fans have speculated that the Queen was actually pregnant at the time they became stranded, gave birth, and tragically died shortly after, and that offspring of the royal couple was none other than Tarzan. Coming in at number 7, Walt Disney. This next one is more of a conspiracy, and while I will admit it is a bit far-fetched, it would also be very creepy if it turned out to be true. The conspiracy begins back in the year 1972, after the LA Times reported that Mr. Walt Disney was apparently interested in the cryogenic process. And while it is widely accepted that Mr. Disney was cremated, it began a huge conspiracy that he was actually cryogenically frozen and is hidden somewhere on the Disney property. This rumor only continued to grow and grow as the years went by, and eventually Google search related to Disney's possible frozen body was off the charts. Now, how does this relate to the smash hit film? Well, some fans are claiming that the Disney studio chose the name Frozen to distract people from the truth. Plus, now if you search Disney Frozen, it will take quite a bit of searching before you come across this conspiracy. One YouTuber even pointed out that, quote, like a lot of Disney movies, Frozen is loosely based off of an old fairy tale called The Snow Queens by Hans Christian Andersen. It could have been called anything, The Ice Princess, or Snow Sisters, for example. I mean, do I think that Walt Disney is cryogenically frozen in secret, and that the Disney creators named a hit movie Frozen to get the scent off their tracks? I mean, I am not totally sold, but hey, I guess stranger things have turned out to be true. Coming in at number 6, the ship. Okay, so I think it's pretty fair to say that not every single fan theory can always coexist. So while there are some out there who believe that Tarzan is the long-lost brother of the Arendelle Kingdom, there are others out there that believe Frozen is linked to a different movie entirely, The Little Mermaid. The idea with this theory is that the ship that we see at the bottom of the ocean in The Little Mermaid is actually the exact same one the king and queen were tragically lost at sea on. Now, before I get into this theory, there is another really popular theory that states Rapunzel is the cousin of Elsa and Anna, meaning that either the king or queen of Corona would be the brother or sister of either the king or queen of Arendelle. So because of that theory, it's been suggested that the mysterious trip the royal couple were on was in fact to visit the kingdom of Corona. Now, with that in mind, we know Frozen is set in Norway, Tangled is set in Germany, and The Little Mermaid is set in Denmark. And Denmark is roughly halfway between the other two, so if fans are correct, that means on their way to visit Germany, their ship sank and became the ship Ariel explores in The Little Mermaid. What do you think? Could it be the same ship? Coming in at number 5, the Trolls and Kristoff. While the Trolls are written to be savers of the day and beloved family of Kristoff, there are some fans out there who are not so inclined to believe the story at face value. And the reason all has to do with traditional Scandinavian folklore. So first things first, although Frozen is obviously set in a fictitious land called Arendelle, it is quite heavily based on Norway and Scandinavian culture. And apparently, in Scandinavian folklore, trolls are actually much more untrustworthy than Frozen makes them out to be. So with that in mind, there are some out there that believe Kristoff was actually kidnapped by the trolls rather than adopted, meaning that he may not have actually been an orphan at all. The theory relies on the fact that we never actually explicitly see Kristoff lose his parents, and so it's fair to assume he could have been related to one of the ice harvesters. Then early on in the movie, we see the young Kristoff follow the royals, who lead him to the trolls, and from there, a troll named Bolda finds him and quickly decides to keep Kristoff as her own. From that point forward, Kristoff becomes brainwashed and amalgamated into the troll's way of life and completely forgets the life he had before. I mean, talk about an evil theory. Coming in at number 4, memory loss. In Frozen 2, the dad tells Anna and Elsa a story of the enchanted forest and the Northuldra before the mom sings them a song and puts them to sleep. However, fans have pointed out the weird part of this is how the dad paints the Northuldra as these monstrous people, and the mom doesn't really say anything, despite that it's her heritage and that she was the one who saved him in the first place. Well, here is where the theory begins. Some fans believe that after the mom saves the dad, they go back to the castle, and when the dad is questioned after being the only one to return, the mom ends up becoming a prisoner. However, already in love with her, the dad convinces the guards to take her to the trolls, who then wipe her memory of anything Northuldra so that she can be released as a prisoner of war and the pair can marry. I mean, there is normal evil, and then there is casting a memory spell on your spouse so that they don't remember their heritage evil. Plus, this also would connect the evil troll theory and explain why the dad would already know of the trolls and where to take Elsa in the first movie. So yeah, it would be pretty messed up if this turned out to be true. Coming in at number 3, Kristoff's coat. When it comes to the animal sidekicks in any Disney movie, there is a general consensus that they are too good for this world and that nothing bad should ever happen to them. And of course, this feeling carries through to the adorable reindeer Sven. Now, one of the most wonderful parts about Sven is the sweet backstory and friendship he has with Kristoff. The pair meet as calf and toddler, respectively, and become attached at the hip, taking on the world together. However, there is a theory out there that is Bambi level tragic and would change quite literally everything about the dynamic of their relationship. Essentially, the theory points out that Kristoff's coat appears to be made from reindeer fur, and that as a baby, we see Kristoff wrapped in a reindeer pelt. Now, the dark part is that some out there believe the pelt is in fact from Sven's mother, and that the ice harvesters must have killed Sven's mother and then wrapped young Kristoff in her pelt. Now smelling of his dead mother, Sven became attached, and Kristoff is just going through life wearing the dead carcass of his best friend's mom on his back. I mean, I don't even want to go there. Coming in at number 2, the parents. There are quite a few theories surrounding the parents of Anna and Elsa. However, this one might just be the darkest one I came across. The theory starts off by pointing out that the queen and king don't exactly deal with Elsa's powers in the healthiest way. You know, the shame, the guilt, and hiding her away from the public and all only made matters worse. What if that was actually all a part of their master evil plan, the whole time. There are some fans out there that theorize Elsa's parents treated her this way as they were trying to turn her into a weapon of war that could be used against their enemies, and that their questionable handling of her gifts was all to make her more dangerous. Plus, if she remained a secret, then no one could see her coming. One of the main pieces of evidence behind this theory is that Hans somehow magically had shackles ready to go in the castle to imprison Anna. But many have pointed out that Hans wouldn't exactly have had the time to create these shackles, which then led fans to deduce that they would have already had to be there in the first place. Which then of course would mean that long ago the king and queen created this prison with the idea to contain Elsa. I mean, if that turned out to be true, that would put them up there with some of the most evil parents in Disney history. And last up in our number 1 spot, Hans isn't the villain. So back to those pesky little Norse trolls, this theory popped up on Reddit from the user individualmushroom3, and let's just say it points out a few more reasons why those trolls should not be trusted. Reddit user starts off by saying that the change in Hans from Disney prince to Disney villain is extremely sudden, and that he thinks the trolls are actually behind the personality shift. Reddit friend explains that when Kristoff takes Anna to the trolls to save her, they make it clear that she's the perfect match for Kristoff. However, when Kristoff tells them during the song that Anna is engaged to someone else, the trolls sing so she's a bit of a fixer-upper, her brain's a bit betwixt, get the fiancé out of the way, and the whole thing will be fixed. This theory suggests that the trolls are so fixated on fixing up Kristoff and Anna that they cast a spell on Hans to turn him into the villain, so that Anna will leave him and instead end up with Kristoff. And if this turns out to be true, this would essentially mean that the lovable singing trolls are the real villains the whole time.
Number 10. Edna Mode is a reformed villain. Yep, you heard that right. Our beloved supersuit seamstress could have been a villain. There are 5 straightforward points to why this is believed. In the film, Edna has a throwaway line about not looking back, dwelling on the past, because it's distracting, and this might be in line with her need to forget her days of villainy. She also seems to be overzealous about seeing heroes in danger or witnessing dangerous combat, almost to a pathological level, and in general, her entire facility is somewhat villainous. It's like an evil lair. It's equipped with auto turrets, flamethrowers, and explosive ordnance. I mean, it's surrounded by a gate and has armed guards, like, come on. Now, other supers and those associated with them live in hiding, but they don't seem to feel that they are in any sort of danger in their day-to-day, and neither does Edna. She has those things because she likes them. Well, except for her guards, perhaps because they're actually government handlers as opposed to guards. And lastly, she made a suit for Jack-Jack. The Parrs never even considered a suit for him, but because Edna thinks like a villain, she accurately predicted Jack-Jack would become a target of Syndrome. Number 9. Syndrome is actually a super, and his power is intelligence. Very early in the movie, Buddy, later known as Syndrome, admits that he has no powers but makes up for it with his inventions. The first inventions we see are his rocket boots, and later we see tons of brilliant gadgets such as zero-point energy, tiny bombs, life sign scanning probes, and an artificially intelligent battle robot. All of these brilliant inventions make people think Syndrome actually did have a superpower. Super intelligence. Now, one might say Syndrome wasn't actually very smart because he made some really idiotic mistakes, such as letting the Incredibles live, using a cape, and underestimating his battle robot's intelligence. However, these mistakes have more to do with his arrogance than his intelligence. He was so smart that he considered himself unbeatable, which caused him to grossly underestimate his enemies. This led to his master plan failing almost immediately, as well as his death, but if his ego didn't get in the way, he probably would have succeeded with his intelligence. Number 8. Mr. and Mrs. Incredible possess clairvoyance. Mr. and Mrs. Incredible have 3 children, Violet, Dash, and Jack-Jack. Each child seems to be obviously named for their superpowers. Dash has super speed, so his name perfectly reflects his ability. Violet can disappear here, which is like the ultraviolet spectrum in light that humans can't see, and she can also create force fields, which just so happen to be the color violet. Jack begins to show his powers at the end of the movie, and it turns out he has a range of different powers, making him somewhat a jack of all trades. Now, unless Dash and Violet were named after displaying their powers, or unless their powers surfaced right at birth, then Bob and Helen got really lucky that their powers just happened to perfectly match their names. But we know that Jack was not named after his powers being displayed because they don't surface until well after his birth and name are given. If Jack is any indication, then the other two kids were named before displaying powers. What are the chances of just randomly picking 3 names that match superpowers so well? The theory is one or both of the parents have clairvoyance and were attracted to those names because on some level they subconsciously knew those names would work out perfectly. You know what? This actually makes sense to me. Number 7. Violet is not Bob's daughter. You remember Snug, the man who had the jet, right? Yep, well, he is Violet's father. Why? Well, since the Parr family have been constantly moving because of Bob's inability to maintain a steady job, it would have been difficult for Helen to sustain her adulterous relationship with Snug throughout her married life. Therefore, Helen could have slept with Snug before the supers were outlawed or immediately after the supers were outlawed. And conveniently so, Violet is her firstborn, and second of all, Helen keeps a picture of Snug in her room next to the picture of her family. Now, we do not see a picture of Bob with any of his old colleagues, which is strange. She could have had Snug's child, which is why Snug let her a jet without complaining, and in Helen's own words, "I'm calling in a solid you owe me." Thirdly, Violet is the weirdest kid of all 3. I mean, everything about her is strange. She is weird and moody while the boys are full of energy. She is introverted while the boys are extroverts. And now you could say this is because she's a teenager, but I mean, even her powers are weird. Bob's power is super strength and invulnerability, Dash is super fast, and Jack is the most powerful, a shapeshifter, while Violet's powers are invisibility and force fields, which are defensive powers. Clearly, she did not get the attacking gene of Mr. Incredible, so this leads to Snug. Also, the most obvious sign, Violet's face is shaped like a football, which is not the head shape of both Helen and Bob, it's the same as Snug's. Case closed. Number 6. Violet Parr is an older Boo from Monsters, Inc. We all know that Pixar likes to connect their movies, right? Well, what if The Incredibles and Monsters, Inc. were connected? When Sully and Boo play hide and seek in the locker room, Sully is amazed at how good she is at hiding. People think this is because her powers are assisting her as she's subconsciously using them to become invisible. Initially, Violet struggles to use her powers in the movie when she really needs them for lack of confidence. Boo is only able to use her powers when she's having fun with Sully, but not when she's in real danger. And also, Boo is comfortable with Sully because his big hulking frame is reminiscent of her father's. Yeah. Also, early on in Monsters, Inc., it is established how each professional scarer is assigned to children that suit them best. Randall's camouflage or invisibility would be ideal for a toddler coming to terms having similar superpowers. Randall would be the representation of what Boo doesn't understand about herself or possibly what she may become, and also, they just look similar. Number 5. Syndrome is the son of Psychwave and Universal Man. This theory suggests that Buddy Pine, aka Syndrome, is a non-super even though he's the son of 2 super-powered beings, specifically Psychwave and Universal Man. Now, Buddy clearly has a complex. He desperately wishes to be a hero, and Bob seems to be familiar with Buddy's mother, and it's established the Parrs are friends with many superheroes. Psychwave and Universal Man are first on Syndrome's list to take out, if you know what I mean, suggesting a personal vendetta against them. And finally, Syndrome's island is similar to that of Phantomix, a former superhero team which included Psychwave. Number 4. Edna is Violet's mother. Flipping the script here, what if Violet had a different mother? What if Violet Parr is not actually part of the Parr family, but rather the daughter of Edna Mode, given up to the Parrs for safekeeping? First, there's Violet's look in general. All other members of the Parr family are drawn similarly. Dash, for example, has blonde hair like his father and a pointed nose like his mother. Baby Jack has reddish blonde hair, picking up some of the reddish brown tones of his mother's hair and a pointed nose. Meanwhile, Violet has black hair and a round nose, which is far more similar to Edna. In the description for the first film, it says that Edna was called out of her 15-year retirement to fix Bob's supersuit. Violet is 14 years old in the first movie. What if Edna retired when the government banned superheroes, but didn't know she was pregnant at the time. Without any help from the government, when Violet was born and displayed powers, Edna decided to give her to a superhero couple who she trusted above everyone else, the Parrs. But as things began to change for superheroes, and with Bob and Helen taking on more responsibility, one of the motivating factors in Edna coming out of retirement was to help keep her daughter safe. Aw, that's so cute. Number 3. The government worked with Syndrome to wipe out the supers. The government agents in The Incredibles had to watch the supers while they were retired to make sure they didn't reveal themselves to strangers. Due to this, they run the relocation program, and when Mr. Incredible throws his boss through several walls, an agent offers to relocate him, then decides it would be better to wipe away everyone's memory. So their job is to watch supers so they could prevent situations like that. Now, if their job is to watch the supers, why didn't they do anything or show concern when supers were disappearing? How did they not know that they were being taken to Syndrome's island? That was their job. And according to the film, a majority of the supers died, so it's strange that they didn't care. That is, unless they were in on it and were working with Syndrome, or at least allowing his experiments. Syndrome was the best solution with dealing with supers. Killing them off meant the government didn't have to spend a fortune protecting them and cleaning up their mistakes. In exchange, Syndrome was making high tech for the government. Syndrome was a business entrepreneur, he had to have high-end customers, and it makes sense he would sell to the government. He then betrays them when he takes over the city, but still no one really cared when he ended the lives of supers. Number 2. Edna sabotaged Syndrome by making him a cape. Oh, that's downright evil, but hear me out. Edna is strongly opposed to capes for very practical reasons. Super Stratogale was only in The Incredibles for a moment during the montage, conveying the danger of capes, as she was the one who got sucked into the turbine of a jumbo jet. Later in the movie, we catch a glimpse of her record, which specifies that she was a high school student. The theory goes that Edna's aversion to capes is so strong because she feels responsible for this death. But the theory also speculates Syndrome came to her for his costume design, wanting to follow in Mr. Incredible's footsteps, and she built in a cape to sabotage him, knowing he was villainous. And that's exactly how Syndrome died, by his cape getting sucked into the turbine of a jet, so who knows if that was a setup. And coming in at number 1, the government eradicated all super villains after the heroes were forced into retirement. When you put the supers into hiding, what happens to the villains? Well, it's said that the government carried out a purge of all supervillains when the superheroes were forced to retire. Think about it. All villains we see in the movie are normal humans. They don't have any evil powers. For example, the guy with the missile during the No Capes montage is just an ordinary man with a missile pointed at a city. A few policemen could have stopped him. Same for Bon Voyage, they didn't need a super to stop him. And the Underminer is similarly a man with a massive drill, and that's about it. Truth be told, Syndrome is the only real threat, and his tech is leagues above the other villains. Now, I understand wanting to get rid of villains, but they couldn't just put them in jail or rehabilitate them. They had to end their lives. And how good of a person are you if you do that? Huh?
Let's start off with a pretty dark implication. The toys from Toy Story are practically immortal, right? It's confirmed they don't require food or water and can theoretically go on living unless they're actively destroyed, like getting melted down or something. Even then, we're not completely sure if they'd lose their sentience. So, the question is, how long can toys be passed down from owner to owner before they're just completely unwanted, damaged beyond repair? Toys like Woody place almost all their self-worth in being played with, so what happens when nobody wants them anymore? New flashy toys, they come out every year, and all these Pixar movies, if they really do take place in the same universe, what are Woody and the crew doing in Wall-E's time? The Earth is ravaged, technology has advanced to the point where nobody's even playing with toys. It's hard not to imagine the toys are destined all for the same fate, to be abandoned. It's also sad to imagine them outliving every human they've ever cared about, so you're welcome for that idea. Next up on the list is the afterlife from Coco. This one's almost less of a theory and more just something you can deduce from the logic that the world sets up. In the world of Coco, the souls of the dead end up in the afterlife, which is depicted as a pretty good time. I'd love to go there when I die. Sure, I mean, you'd be a skeleton, but I'll take it. Just looks like the best party you've ever been to, except it never ends. That is until you're forgotten. Once the people in the living world forget about you, you disappear from the afterlife. Now that kinda sucks. I'd rather party than disappear. That's a great album title right there. Rather party than disappear. But here's the extra dark part. The whole remembering the dead thing means that famous people and historical figures remain in the afterlife pretty much indefinitely. I mean, I guess one day they'll be forgotten, but take a very long time. And while there are great people who fall under that category, there are an equal number of awful ones. We got, evil dictators, people like that who we should never and should never forget, mind you. But in the Coco universe, there are theoretically a lot of garbage souls partying in the afterlife, while so many good, honest, everyday people are eventually forgotten. And that's pretty dark. Up next, we have the Toy Story metaphor. This theory can either be seen as something Andy is actually playing out with his toys as his home life is seeping its way into his fictional world, or you can look at it as if the Toy Story movie itself is simply the metaphor. So, we don't see Andy's dad in the movies. There's a pretty popular theory that he's dead, but there's also a theory that Andy's parents are just divorced and that there's a lot going on in Andy's home life that we just don't see. That maybe Andy's mom got a new boyfriend and that his new father figure is entering into Andy's life, overshadowing his real father. Similar to the way Buzz becomes Andy's favorite shiny new toy, leaving Woody feeling jealous and abandoned. Alright, at number 7 on the list, we have a Toy Story 2 theory that being Wheezy's true intentions. We all felt sorry for this pathetic, dusty, forgotten about squeaky penguin toy, and how could we not? It was just so pathetic and dusty and forgotten about. But there is a theory that's been floating around for a while, a very believable theory that Wheezy isn't as innocent as he lets on. Woody finds Wheezy stranded on the bookshelf, unable to call for help because of his broken squeaker. Andy's mom comes into the room and grabs Wheezy, deciding to sell him at the upcoming garage sale. Woody goes to save Wheezy, but ends up getting bought himself, and thus our story begins. This dark theory suggests that Wheezy wanted to get taken to the garage sale all along, knowing Woody would come to his rescue, and it was all done in the hopes that Woody would be bought and taken out of the picture so that Wheezy would have a better chance of getting attention from Andy. Perhaps Wheezy was just toying with our emotions all along. Maybe he's not as squeaky clean as we once thought. So this next one is from Wreck-It Ralph. So yeah, it's technically not a Pixar movie, but I mean, it's Disney. It's 3D animated, close enough. So there's this theory about what Sergeant Calhoun was seeing when she was firing at the cybug that just ate her husband on their wedding day, mind you. Already pretty dark. She had neglected to do a perimeter check, so right on the altar, this giant cybug bursts in and takes out her soon-to-be husband in one gulp. We cut to a shot of Calhoun firing at the creature, and we never see what she's actually looking at. But we can imagine it's obviously the cybug being shot up, which is definitely not the most kid-friendly thing to show. However, there's an even darker element at play here. Really, it's less of a theory and just a downright fact. Cybugs take on the form of what they consume. So there's a good chance she was looking into the face of her own husband as she was firing at the creature. So, pretty gut-wrenching. At number 5, we have a theory from Monsters, Inc. concerning Randall. There are a few Randall-related Monsters, Inc. theories out there, which makes sense. He's a real creep. He definitely planted a lot of dark ideas in people's heads. This one isn't super dark or anything, but it does make you look at another Pixar character in a bit of a different light. Yes, it's a Toy Story Monsters Inc. connection, that perhaps Randall was Andy's monster. A lot of you may have heard of this one. When we see Randall practicing his camouflaging technique, we see him trying to blend in with several different backgrounds, one of which happens to be that iconic wallpaper seen in Andy's room. There's no reason really to believe that these two universes aren't connected. In fact, it's pretty much been confirmed, not only because of the various other Easter eggs sprinkled throughout the movies, but there is a canon comic book that sees Sid from Toy Story entering into the monster world. So yeah, I can't really think of any reason why Randall, being one of these scarers entering into all these different doors around the world, wouldn't come across poor little Andy. I picture like Woody and Buzz just laying on the floor, that wide-eyed thing they always have, just watching this crazy lizard monster walk into Andy's room. They're just talking about it the next day. Buzz, did that lizard come in here again last night? Was that just a nightmare? Next up, we have another Toy Story 2 theory. This one being that perhaps Andy's mom was the previous owner of Jessie. While the films never, they don't explicitly say it, but there are some clues that really do support this theory. In Toy Story 2, we see a flashback of Jessie's life when somebody loved her. Awful. That being a girl named Emily who ended up abandoning her when she got older. The flashback shows Emily with a very similar appearance to Andy's mom, really, and she even has that cowboy hat that looks a lot like the one Andy wears. Perhaps Andy's mom is Emily, and she held on to that hat because she never stopped enjoying dressing up like a cowboy and passed the hat down to Andy. That would mean that Andy's mom just left Jessie behind in a box on the side of the road. How she raised such a good kid like Andy, I'll never know though. Andy would never do something like that. Next on the list, we had the by and large theory. This one makes a lot of sense to the point where it's kind of hard not to believe. It's pretty much just a confirmed thing. We all know how present the B&L Corporation is in WALL-E, having been responsible for the mass consumerism that left Earth uninhabitable, but we actually see B&L in various Pixar films, leading to the theory that the corporation was growing in power all throughout the Pixar timeline, and that it's the connective glue that holds all the films together. Buzz's batteries in his back are made by B&L. We see the logo show up in Cars. There's even a theory that states that B&L was responsible for the bulldozing of Carl's home and Up. If this is really the case, it definitely adds a dark layer to these movies, knowing that this seedy company was increasingly growing in power behind the scenes while all this other kind of friendly stuff was going on. Speaking of by and large though, let's talk about another dark Toy Story theory. So we discussed those batteries in Buzz's back with the B&L logo on them. Well, this next theory dictates that B&L was responsible for causing the sentience of all the toys in the Toy Story movies, having imbued them with advanced artificial intelligence technology. In all honesty, I think this theory is pretty dumb. I think the toys are alive because it's a kid's movie and they just are alive, but it's kind of fun to imagine that maybe there's something darker going on, I guess. And considering that all these movies have been confirmed to take place in the same universe, I suppose it's possible. And coming in at number 1, here's a theory that's been discussed plenty of times, even on this channel, but I gotta mention it because it has indeed been confirmed by the creative director of the series, Jay Ward. The theory was that the cars from the film Cars were responsible for the downfall of humanity. The cars were created by humans as artificial intelligence and were programmed to serve their owners. However, over time, the cars became self-aware and began to resent their human creators. In an act of rebellion, the cars rose up against their human masters, which led to the extinction of humanity. The evidence for this theory lies in the background of the Cars films, which shows the ruins of human civilization and the fact that there aren't any humans to be seen. Additionally, the cars in the films exhibit a level of intelligence and self-awareness that suggests they are more than just machines, and as it turns out, they are. In fact, their personalities and voices are taken from the last people who drove them, their previous owners, so oof.
Starting us off at number 10, Monsters Inc. and Toy Story. The Monsters Inc. franchise is no stranger to a dark fan theory, and while this one might not be as evil as the theory surrounding harvesting blood, it's definitely still something you hope isn't true. Provided that we're all on board with the overall Pixar universe theory, it would stand to reason that the young minds in the Pixar universe, like Andy for example, would be subject to the scream-inducing monsters from Monstropolis. I mean, who else would they be scaring, really? Today, however, we are just focusing on one monster, Randall. Some fans out there believe that Randall could be not only the villain of Monsters Inc., but also Andy's monster in his own version of reality, and the reasons behind it are kind of intriguing. The first reason that is pointed out is that Randall is seen practicing camouflage in front of a background that looks exactly like the walls in Andy's room. And the second reason is that in Toy Story 3, we see a sign on Andy's closet with a picture of a creature that looks just like Randall. I mean, why else would he have a drawing of a scary monster if it wasn't him trying to get the scary monster that comes in his room at night out of his head? So yeah, For all we know, Randall was terrorizing poor Andy as well as Boo. Coming in at number 9, Riley's monster. Speaking of Monsters Inc. crossovers, this next theory suggests that Riley too could have been one of the scaries the monsters had to visit at night. Now, there is one theory out there that suggests that Bing Bong is actually Riley's monster, but from like after the first Monsters Inc. movie where they were harvesting laughter, hence why he wouldn't be a frightening presence in her life. And while I can definitely see that one holding up, there is another conflicting fan theory that is a bit more interesting. The second theory is that Bing Bong is simply her imaginary friend, as we're told, but that he contains clues relating to who her actual monster is. As you might remember from the movie, Bing Bong tells us what he was inspired from, but he just so happens to leave out where his legs came from. Suspicious. Fans have pieced together that this is because his legs are inspired by her monster, George Sanderson, whose fur exactly resembles the yellow and orange striped legs we see on Bing Bong. And so, the reason that Bing Bong can't identify where his legs come from is because Riley was either so afraid of George that she blocked the memory, or she just pretended not to remember as she was trying to turn something frightening into something more positive. Now, if all this is true, that would also mean the sock on George's back that causes the entire ruckus at the beginning of Monsters Inc. would have been Riley's, which is a fun little Easter egg. Coming in at number 8, Bruce the shark. In the movie Finding Nemo, Bruce made us all giggle as he held his Sharks Anonymous meeting, stating the now famous catchphrase, "Fish are friends, not food." But some fans out there began to wonder just where he might have gotten this belief system from. After all, I am only aware of 2 vegetarian sharks in the media, Lenny from Shark Tale and Bruce. Well, some fans think they have gotten to the bottom of it, and I gotta say, if anything, this one is an entertaining theory. According to fans, Bruce is actually the son of the shark from Jaws, but that his dad abandoned him when he was young and he was raised by a single mother. Just stay with me. The theory then goes on to explain that his mother was likely wanting her child to be unlike his father, and so raised him to be as kind-hearted as she could. Now, as I already mentioned, in Finding Nemo, Bruce has his shark support group whose mantra goes against the killing machine narrative that is so often associated with sharks. And some fans theorize that Bruce is so afraid of becoming his dad that he formed this support group to make his mother proud and to try and hold himself accountable. I mean, this one is a bit far-fetched, I have to admit, but hey, you have to admit it would be wild if it turned out to be true. Next up at number 7, The Emperor's New Groove. So before anyone says it, I know The Emperor's New Groove is not a part of the Pixar canon, but this is a list about Disney Pixar theories, so I'm gonna lean a little heavy on the Disney side for this one. This theory starts off by noticing that when the fly screams out to Llama Cusco for help before being eaten by a spider, it's screaming out in English. Now, to most, this might have been a fairly insignificant bit of the movie, however, this fan theory suggests that it could actually be super grim. Essentially, they point out that the only animals that are able to speak in the movie are the ones who were originally human, i.e., Yzma the cat, and of course Cusco as the llama. So, if animals in this universe can only speak English if they were once human, it means the fly about to be eaten by a giant spider is a human trapped in a fly's body. The only hole I kinda wanna poke through this one is that the squirrel kind of talks. I mean, he speaks and squeaks, but Kronk does understand him, so I guess you could also propose that the squirrel was once a human too, and that he just has been a squirrel for so long he's forgotten how to speak? Because, I mean, he can definitely communicate and get a point across as well as any other character in the movie. I don't know, I'm just spitballing. I'm just glad there's no real life potions that could turn me into a fly and make me spider food. Next up at number 6, Wreck-It Ralph. This next one was posted to Reddit by the user It's Got to Make Sense, and it makes an already sad backstory into an even more chilling theory. So, as you might remember, in the movie Wreck-It Ralph, one of the characters, Calhoun from the Hero's Duty game, tells the tragic story about her husband being eaten by a cybug and that she had to kill said cybug at their wedding. I mean, already, super not great. However, they explain that it gets even darker when you piece together the fact that during the movie we learn that cybugs morph into whatever they eat. Calhoun herself mentions this a few times, and we see it in action with Ralph's laser gun and then again with King Candy. So that would in turn mean that when Calhoun's husband was eaten, the cybug would have quickly started morphing into the image of him, and that she would be forced to shoot at not only a creature that just ate her husband, but one that looked just like him too. And on her wedding day to boot. Talk about a rough day. Next up at number 5, Onward and Toy Story. Onward is one of the newer films that's been added to the canon, having only been released in 2020, but wouldn't you know it, some fans believe it could be connected to the one that started it all. The movie Onward centers around 2 teenage elf brothers, the younger Ian and the eldest Barley, whose father tragically passed away before Ian was born. On Ian's 16th birthday, the boy's mother gives her sons a magical toolkit that can bring their father back for one day. But of course, shenanigans unfold and the boys must set out on a journey in order to be able to complete the magic spell. Now, the fan theory surrounding this one is actually more sad than evil, but hey. So for this theory to work, you also have to remember there is a pretty big fan theory that suggests Andy from Toy Story's dad is also dead. And so essentially, some fans believe that Onward is not actually its own story, but that it is a story that is imagined in the head of Andy to help him cope with the loss of his father. Meaning that Andy is trying to imagine a world where he could live in a magical universe and bring his dad back to life. I mean, just break my heart already. Coming in at number 4, Pixar Endgame. As we are all well aware at this point, the biggest theory of them all is the Pixar universe theory, which, just like any other universe theory, imagines that all the movies exist in the same world and that their characters and plots overlap and intertwine. So, based on this umbrella theory, there is a fan theory surrounding the conclusion or end goal for the characters of this universe, and that is a complete human apocalypse followed by running the world and ruling over humans forever. Sounds just like the cheery stories you remember watching as a kid, right? Essentially, this theory suggests that it's actually all the talking toys, inanimate objects, and talking animals that send humans away on the Axiom ship because they were all fed up with being treated like second-class citizens and being used by their human owners. Then, once the humans return to Earth with the help of Wall-E, a pseudo-supervillain uprising begins, forcing the humans to work for the toys and be treated just as they were for all those years. Now, this one is dark, but maybe the worst part about it is that if it were true, that would mean that Wall-E would have to be in on the plot, meaning that he would actually be luring humanity back, not to help regrow it, but to imprison it under a new dictatorship of malevolent toys. Which, yeah, is definitely darker than how I remember it. Coming in at number 3, Monstropolis isn't real. Once again, we have yet another sinister theory to add to the Monsters, Inc. franchise, and this one involves my favorite character, Boo, but it's definitely not my favorite theory. The theory starts off by saying that when you watch Monsters, Inc., Boo seems to be having a blast with her new monster friends, Sully and Mike. But the bad part comes in when they ask, what if Monstropolis wasn't a real place at all? What if the monsters aren't real? And what if the story of Monsters, Inc. is merely a warped trauma memory created by Boo to cope with being kidnapped? You see already why I hate this theory. Essentially, this theory states that when Boo returned from this adventure, her parents would have been worried sick, and the story they would have got is that she was taken in the night by some monsters who made her scream, and then proceeded to hang out in a strange city with said fuzzy giant and a one-eyed monster. So could it be that Sully was less of a friendly fuzzball and more of a creepy, overly hairy kidnapper? I mean, I choose to believe no because I love Boo too much, but let me know what you think of this one. Coming in at number 2, Bon Voyage is the real villain. While most of us watched the Incredibles movie thinking the main villain was Syndrome, there are some fans out there that have a different opinion. According to this theory, the villain we see at the top of the movie, Bon Voyage, is actually far more evil than Syndrome ever was, as he was actually behind the entire lawsuit compete against the supers. Let me break it down. Fans point out that in the movie, the man who appears to be taking his own life, who is saved by Mr. Incredible, was not just some random guy, but actually a henchman of Bon Voyage planted to simultaneously protect the supers from ruining Bon Voyage's heist and then be the catalyst for the lawsuit. Supporters of this theory point out it seems fairly convenient that this man happens to be jumping from the building at the exact same time a heist is taking place when two well-known superheroes just so happen to be nearby. And so it's believed he was used to lure the supers into the building, which in turn allowed the unknown henchman to later claim it as an unwanted act, hence outlawing supers and allowing villains to go on scheming completely undisturbed forever. And last up in our number 1 spot, Linguini. It didn't take long for the world to fall in love with Remy the rat. I mean, honestly, what wasn't to love about the adorable little critter? But this theory might have you second guessing just how quickly you fell for him. One Reddit user suggested that Remy might not be an actual character, but rather a metaphor for something much darker: drug addiction. The theory explains that Linguini, who is the chef that Remy controls, is not so much under the influence of a super amazing rat chef, but rather another illegal substance. To make matters more evil, the theory then reminds us that Linguini's father, the famous and acclaimed Gusteau, was one of Paris's best chefs, and so all that pressure would have been a lot to handle. And so Linguini, now finding himself working in a restaurant and feeling like he can't live up to his legacy, turns to other substances for a sense of confidence, and it's only when under those influences that he can magically cook. But of course he keeps it a secret, knowing he'll be judged if anyone finds out the truth. Now what makes this even darker is that in the end, he's still cooking with Remy, so I'm not sure it's got the best message. All I have to say is, as far as evil theories go, this one is a lot. I mean, can't we just enjoy a nice story?
Number 10. Wall-E destroyed the Earth. Now, while Wall-E is definitely one of the cutest characters Pixar has created, even though he's just a robot, this theory shows that cute doesn't always mean peaceful. The theory goes that Wall-E was just another waste collection robot built to help with the Earth Recovery Act, but he either had some crossed wires or just wasn't very good at his job, and he loved to collect trinkets and little human artifacts. But all the other robots just doing their job were compacting anything and everything they could get their little grippers on, including Wall-E's stuff. This made the little robot snap, and he started destroying the other robots bit by bit and keeping the parts for himself. We see this in the movie when he takes a part off of a downed robot to replace his worn out treads. Over time, Wall-E cannibalized the rest of the robots, allowing him to continue to function for over 700 years, way past his original life cycle. And now he can collect his trinkets while still doing his job in peace. But at what cost? With all of the other collection units broken, the trash problem only gets worse until we see the world as it stands at the beginning of the film. Number 9. Andy's Monster. Before I move on, please hit those like and subscribe buttons if you're enjoying the video so far. I'd really appreciate it. In Monsters, Inc., we learn that all children have a monster that is assigned to scare them so that they can collect the screams for energy. But since all the Pixar movies are connected, that means that characters from other movies have monsters too. In one of the training montage scenes in Monsters, Inc., we see Randall Boggs practicing his camouflage skills up against many different backgrounds, one of which is the same blue sky with clouds wallpaper we see on Andy from Toy Story's bedroom walls. Since Randall is the only one who can turn invisible like this, it shows that he is preparing up against things he may actually have to blend into. Randall seems to be the reason that Andy needs his toys for protection. Other scenes in the movie show a room that has the same poster Sid does in his room, showing another connection to Toy Story and why Sid may have been so mean. Number 8. Marriage turned inside out. I love Inside Out for giving a generation of kids a way to think about their emotions and teach them that finding a balance and talking about your emotions is the real key to happiness. But not all the characters in the movie have learned that lesson yet. It seems as though Riley's parents have a lot of work to do on their own, or more likely, together. When we have the brief glimpses inside of her parents' heads, we can see what's really going on. Sometimes her dad just isn't listening and is replaying an old memory, or sometimes they're distracted by their own emotions. While we would all hope that joy is the emotion running all of our controls, it seems that her parents aren't so lucky. Her dad's main emotion seems to be anger, with him running the show, yelling and getting literally hot-headed at the slightest things, while inside her mom's head, sadness takes center stage. This shows that the two may not be in the healthiest of places on their own, let alone as a couple. And I'm sure that this has led to some strife in Riley's life. Personally, I think that everyone needs to see a therapist a few times in their life. It really helps, I promise. And hopefully Riley's parents get some counseling and can learn to put joy back at the center of their controls. Number 7, All in the Family. While the story of Ratatouille takes us on a journey of Linguini becoming an amazing chef, thanks to his rat friend Remy, for lack of a better term, driving him from under his chef's hat, many believe that this is not the first time that this has happened in the Pixar universe. If you look closely at the cover of the Food and Wine magazine in the opening sequence, you can just make out what appears to be something under Chef Gusteau's hat. Some believe that this is his own little chef, who helped Gusteau become the culinary star he was. But if a quick picture isn't enough to convince you, how about this? When Skinner is trying to figure out if Linguini really is the heir to Gusteau's restaurant, he has a DNA test performed. He uses hair taken from Gusteau's hat and some DNA collected from Linguini. But the first time the lawyer ran the sample, it came back as rodent hair. We're led to believe that this was a hair taken from Linguini and was mixed up with Remy the rat's hair. But we never see a hair sample taken from Linguini. It's actually implied that Skinner used saliva that he got from the wine glass when he and Linguini were drinking wine in the office. So there was actually a rat hair in Gusteau's toque, and some even believe that it was Remy's mom who was under there, and she was likely killed by Skinner just before the review that brought down Gusteau's restaurant. Number 6, Carpocalypse. This theory is pretty well known, but I still think it's worth talking about here. There are so many interesting things about the Cars world that just don't make sense. Like, if there are no humans around, why do the cars have handles? Why are there human-sized doors and staircases and rooms that cars couldn't operate? Unless the world was originally built by and for humans. More examples like the London Eye and the Eiffel Tower and the fact that sidewalks exist at all prove this theory further. But how did we get here? Some think that at some point in the not-so-distant future, AI built into cars becomes self-aware, and after implanting itself into all the cars being built, decides that humans were no longer necessary and disposed of them all. After a few thousand years, with fuel supplies running low, the cars actually began to convert the human remains into fuel, like how we use fossil fuels in our current age. Crazy stuff. Number 5, Crazy Coincidence. Sticking in the Cars universe, we actually now get to include the Planes movies as well. These films obviously take place in the same world, as planes and cars are seen interacting together all the time. But Planes gave us a very interesting look into the anthropomorphic vehicle's history. We learned from the character Skipper that he fought in what was essentially World War II. But we've established already that there are no humans left on this world, so does that mean that the cars have repeated some of humanity's worst atrocities? Some Reddit theorists believe so, and that opens up the floor for so many more questions, like, was there a car Churchill? Was there an evil mustache Volkswagen? And on another note, if there's a car Pope, does that mean that there was also a car Jesus? So many questions, so little gas mileage. Number 4, Incredibles United. There is a steadfast rule in the Incredibles films from superhero costume maker Edna Mode.
Knock it!
The main reason for this seems to be because she designed the costume for a teen hero named Stratogale, who met her untimely demise due to her cape. Stratogale had many powers, including the ability to talk to birds, and unfortunately, like many birds before her, she got caught in an airplane turbine. But since a bird and an engine causes major damage to a plane, surely a whole human would cause way more. In 1989, one of the worst single aircraft disasters happened when United Airlines Flight 232 suffered an engine failure, causing the plane to crash land, and only 184 of the 296 passengers survived. The plane in The Incredibles bears resemblance to one from United Airlines. Heroes have also been in hiding for 15 years until the film's release in 2004. 15 years before that being 1989. Some believe that in the Incredibles universe, the tragedy of Stratogale and the crash of Flight 232 are one and the same. And that is the reason the heroes had to go into hiding. Number 3. Brave Boo. Boo is by far one of the most adorable characters in the Pixar universe. She's sweet and funny, and she's so very, very sneaky. But some believe that she grows up to be something a bit more sinister. The witch from Brave. Some theorists think that Monsters Inc. takes place far into the future, and that the doors they go through don't just lead to different locations, but to different times as well. And this is one of the main ways that the joint universe theory is held together. Boo learns and remembers that doors are somehow the key to finding Sully, or Kitty, again, and devotes her whole life to discovering this secret world. She eventually gains access, but goes through a door that sends her back in time, to the Middle Ages. Here she learns all sorts of magic from the Will-o'-the-Wisps, including the spell that turns Merida's mother into a bear. The driving plot of Brave. Far-fetched, I know, but in the witch's hut is a mountain of evidence proving the witch is a time-traveling Boo. One of the wood carvings is of the Pizza Planet truck, and there's a drawing of Sully on a log in the background, and the witch seems to often disappear through doors.
Coincidence? I think not!
Number 2. Shopper's Syndrome. This next theory is one that I haven't really heard talked about much. It states that the company by and large, the same one that seems to own most of the human world in WALL-E, and earlier on as the company that made Buzz's batteries in Toy Story 3, and the company that forced Carl to leave his house in Up, was actually founded by Syndrome, the villain from the first Incredibles movie. As a young inventor, he created all sorts of robotic technologies that would go on to change and conquer the world. Many of the technological gadgets in WALL-E have a direct connection to Syndrome, such as the zero-point energy that restrains Eve, who also uses flight and organic scanners like Syndrome's Omnidroids. After his death, the company moved away from producing killer robots and began making commercial products, and monopolizing every industry that it could, until eventually, they took over the world just like its founder always wanted. Number 1. All the way up. This final theory is one that I personally believe to be the most plausible and the most heartbreaking. And here's the main thesis. The story of Up is actually Carl Fredricksen's journey to the afterlife, to finally be with his wife Ellie again. Now let's break it down. First of all, the amount of balloons Carl used to lift his house off of the foundations, which Pixar has said is 20,622, is not nearly enough to perform such a feat. So right there, we have a clue that this may not have been real. Many think that Russell is Carl's guardian angel, but he still needs to earn his wings, or, in other words, once he earns his Assisting the Elderly badge, his training will be complete and he will be a full wilderness explorer, or a guardian angel. So now, we have an old man lifting off the ground into the sky and traveling to Paradise Falls. Sure sounds like the journey to heaven to me. Throw in an evil person masquerading as a childhood hero who has evil dogs doing his bidding, not unlike the Hounds of Hell, and you have a pretty good allegory. In the end, Carl reaches Paradise Falls, and we can only hope he is at peace and with Ellie.